Hi, my name is Bob Taylor, and I'm your host for this segment of Our Ventura TV. I'm here today with my guest, Sylvia Taylor-Stein, a new local author. Well, good afternoon, Sylvia. Thank you for being here.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for asking me, Bob.
Before we start talking about your book, I've always been told if there's something you want from a busy person or something you want done, talk to a busy person. What is it you do for a living?
I actually am the director of the Ventura County Ombudsman Program. Long-term care services, a nonprofit in Ventura County. We've been around since 1981, and we actually monitor facilities, nursing homes, and other long-term care facilities in the county, and advocate for the residents who live there.
And you monitor them? How do you monitor them?
We visit the nursing homes every week, and we have 55 volunteers now. They're state certified. They go into all the nursing homes and just work with the residents, check with the residents. How are you doing? How is everything going here? And we actually just monitor the facilities for care issues, neglect, abuse, medication, menus, you name it.
And so your job in the real world is working with mostly volunteers to make sure that the elderly are in good shape.
Yeah, working with the residents themselves. We have 8,500 in the county now and 233 facilities.
Wow.
19 are nursing homes, so those are weekly visits, and the others are monthly visits.
So that's an awful lot of visits in our little county here.
That's a lot of visits and a lot of miles. Last year they drove about 50,000 miles around the county to visit these
Just
homes.
to make sure our residents are okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, they're an invisible population.
Yes, very much so.
That's right.
All right, so that's what you do for a living. Now, I also know you do a lot of volunteer work.
I do.
Okay, and what do you do in the way of volunteer stuff?
I work with the California Long-Term Care Ombudsman Association. I'm on the board of directors. I've been on the board for 9 or 10 years. And we do a lot of working on policies to try to improve the lives of residents statewide in California. I go to hearings and do legislative activity. I also work with Dementia Friendly Ventura County. That's a new program of their Agency on Aging. I'm on their leadership team, their task force. I volunteer with my church. I do workshops on aging parents. I did a series of workshops a year ago for adult children who have aging parents. So I do that, and also work with the grandparent ministry team, the launch team for my church.
Okay, so your full-time job sounds pretty much like a full-time volunteer schedule, and
it's busy.
So much with the church, which is another full-time thing, almost.
It can be.
So all of a sudden in that, you decided to write a book because you just weren't busy enough.
I did. And actually, I didn't decide to write the book. I think, felt called to write the book.
Great answer. And feeling called to write the book, why you, and what qualifications did you feel you had to be called to do that?
Well, I didn't think about it as qualifications, Bob. I actually just had an experience with my grandson. And he came to visit one weekend, and this was a few years ago. And he came to visit, and he said he wanted to do riddles and rhymes.
How old?
He was 8.
8, okay.
He was 8, and he wanted to do riddles and rhymes, and so he just stumped us all weekend, me and my husband, hundreds of rhymes and riddles that he had found, and like what's the greenhouse and what's the yellow hat, and all these crazy things, and it went on all weekend, and it was just his latest thing that he wanted to do. And he left to go home, and the next morning I was praying, Lord, how in the world do I take something he loves so much and teach him about you?
I got goosebumps.
And it just came to me, write about me. And so I thought, well, there's got to be something out there already written, riddles and rhymes, Bible stories, that kind of thing. I started looking. I couldn't find anything that I felt was the quality I was looking for. And so then it just came to me, well, I should just write these for him. And so I had written poetry since I was 8 years old.
Oh, just something else to throw into your little hat there.
It was just, I guess it's just in my DNA, and I had written rhymes and I'd written poetry, and I would just write, even when I was very young, I'd write kind of deep things. And so I thought, well, I've always written poetry, I've written songs, I've written lyrics. So this was part of my DNA, very easy. So I thought, well, I'll just see if I can write a little rhyme for him. And I started with John the Baptist and Jesus, and I wrote this little description of John the Baptist. And I would email them to my son, and he would read them, and then he would have Jackson, my grandson, he would have him look it up in the Bible scriptures, and then there were 3 questions he had to answer, like who is this, what are they doing, what's, and everyone he got right, he had to email me back. He had to actually write it himself, and he would email me back, and he got 2 points for every one he got right. And so when he gets 100 points, he was supposed to get a precious stone, because he was into precious stones. And so I got to about number 20. And I'm sending these off every week, and I'm thinking, and I was sharing with a few of my friends, and I'm doing this, and they go, why aren't you need to do something with that? And so I talked to my husband about it, and he said, yeah. He said, why don't you figure out a way that other people, because people get really excited. I said, I'm doing this with my grandson. This is how I'm teaching him about God.
There's not much better than grandkids, Sylvia.
I know. And so they were like, well, can I have some of your rhymes and riddles? And I went, sure. And then it came to me, I need to do something much bigger with this. And I just felt inspired by God to go ahead and move forward. It was very risky. I've never published a book in my life. But my grandmother, when I was growing up, when I was just a little bitty girl, I would spend, she had a farm next to my parents' farm, and I would go spend days with her. And my grandmother was the greatest Bible storyteller in the world. And she never picked up the Bible and read to me. She knew it so well, she told me stories. And she would just make them come alive. And I remembered all those stories she had told me and the parables. And I thought, I'm just going to start at the beginning of the Bible. I'll start with Genesis, and I'm just going to go through. And the ones that come to me, I'm going to write about them. So I wrote 52 rhymes, one for every week, for a full year. And then I thought, well, these should be illustrated, because I remembered as a child how much I love pictures. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to just look at a book. I wanted to have a picture.
Just like my grandkids.
So we started advertising for an illustrator, and we couldn't find one. We had each of them do one sketch, Daniel and the Lion's Den. That was their job. If they could do that, then we were going to see where we could go with it. We couldn't find the right illustrator, and we really prayed about it. And this young man in Brazil saw our ad and responded. And he did the Daniel the Lion's Den. And he was just a young, just upcoming, just barely believing Christian. And one of the requirements was that you have to be able to read the Bible. You have to be able to really dissect these stories.
Right.
And so it took him 2 years to illustrate the book.
Well, so how long has this book actually been in the works, from conception to print? How many years? It took 3 years.
3 years.
Now, the stories, you said you did 52 stories to start with. Were those just inspired so you could just write them all out and without an awful lot of thought? So
I wrote it all 52. I had them all done in 6 months.
Okay.
And then I would go through and edit them, because I'd go back and read them, and I'd go, oh, no, I need to change that word. And I revised a number of them to make them simpler.
Right.
And also to make them more biblically accurate. I wanted to be sure that I had all...
Right. Things matched.
Yeah, that everything was... I wanted to make it as accurate as possible. The illustrations took so long. He's a very gifted artist, but they took so long because I did not want this book to... This is not a nursery rhyme book. This book is for older children. And children as young as 3 and 4 love it. But, we have young adults in college going, I love this book.
Well, I do know the couple little pages that I read, the opportunity I got to look at it, I looked at that and thought to myself, this isn't a kid's book.
No.
I mean, it really is, it really does say a lot to the adults reading it.
Yeah.
And it puts it in, because there's some stories that really are hard stories when you look at them. Noah's Ark,
Right.
a lot of death and bad
Right.
things behind some of that. Even Daniel and the Lion's Den.
Right.
And in this kind of book, you can bring the good parts of that out without looking at the bad parts that
Right.
were part of that.
And looking at the miracle that God did in Daniel's life, looking at the miracle God did in Noah's life, looking at the promise God gave us with the rainbow. See, these are, and the illustrations, what I was going to say, they took so long because I didn't want the typical
Right.
illustration. I wanted the men to look like men, and I wanted the women to look like women. And the scene with Noah and the ark, him and his sons. He and his sons are building the ark, and you can see the muscles, and you can see the tools, and you can see the ark, huge ark going up. And so those were the illustrations I wanted. So I worked very closely with my illustrator, who actually became a very strong believing Christian through this process. So that was a miracle. But God just blessed this. I can only give him credit, Bob, because never having done this before, I mean, he brought people into this project, talented people, the designer who did the whole packaging and the covers,
Right.
and strong Christian man that we'd known many years ago, but he came into our life and worked on this. I mean, it's just been such a...
Things you wouldn't have expected to happen.
No.
You know, I kind of think about that in the way of a pastor. There are a lot of great pastors that you can tell are pastors because they want to be, and there's nothing wrong with that, but their messages just don't seem the same as those that have no choice about being a pastor. You know what I mean? I mean, you really had no choice about that book. You'd had to fight to not write that book.
No, I knew I needed to do it, and it's been such a blessing to have people write me, to send me emails, to write me and send me photos and say, this is my... Just this past week, we had I got a photo of an 11-year-old girl who they were having brunch around the breakfast table, and her grandmother sends me this photo. She's got my book right in the middle of her plate, and she's not going to let them eat until they have read the story in the book. Okay,
we're just about out of time. There's two things I want. Number one, where can people find out information about it? I mean, you got a website?
We do.
Okay.
It's www.BibleTimesPublishing.com.
BibleTimesPublishing.com. We got about 2 minutes. What is your favorite little story in there? And pull it out and show me the book and read it to me.
Well, let me tell you, I've got a lot of favorites, so I'm just going to pull one out. How's that?
Okay.
Here's the one of Moses. This is the Moses leading the Israelites up through the Red Sea. It's called the Miracle. They had no place to run, pushed up against the sea. Pharaoh's army driving hard, they cried out desperately. God instructed Moses, hold up the staff that's in your hand. The sea parted before their eyes. Israel crossed on dry land. But not so for Pharaoh's army, who hoped Israel to enslave again. The staff was lowered, and his great army was covered in water and sand. For the sea came crashing down on them. God in his power had spoken. The children of Israel were saved that day, and slavery's yoke was broken. And then the questions are, why did Pharaoh chase the children of Israel? And what was God trying to teach his people in the miracle? And then the scriptures, Exodus and Psalm, are here. So the children can read the Psalms, they can answer the questions. They can read Exodus and answer the question.
So it's more than just a storybook, it's a study guide.
It's a study guide, all in the same page.
Oh, that's just beautiful. Sylvia,
And
thank you very much.
This is yours.
Oh, you know, my grandkids are going to get some of this tonight, whether they want it or not.
I think they'll like it.
Oh, I don't see why not. They both like the Bible stories, and they love the pictures and all those little Bible books.
They'll love. How old are they?
4, and she'll be 7 next week, going on 19,
perfect
as
age.
every 7-year-old girl
Perfect
is.
age.
Thank you very much for being with us today, Sylvia.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, my name is Bob Taylor. I've been here today with my guest, Sylvia Taylor-Stein, new local author. Until next time, thank you all very much.